Hi there, I'm going to explain to you in this video how to do your EarthCraft budget. So you need to complete this once per game day, and it can be a little bit complicated, so I suggest that you do a practice budget with the team that you've got, pretending that it's game day 0, so just looking at all the stuff that you start off with. So in the EarthCraft manual, there will be a list of all of the resources that you start with, how much cash you start with, how much steel you start with, how much energy you start with, and how much food you start with. And that will form the basis, that will help you to do your budget. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill out a little place I'm going to call Pretend Land. Okay, so the first thing you need to do, make sure that you always do this, put in the name of your team, so that if the World Bank, who checks your budget, they look at it, they'll know whose it is. So I'm going to call myself Team Pretendland, Game Day 0. Right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work out how much money I've earned and how much money I've spent. So what I would do is I would have a look on the board and count how many factories I've got. That's these things here, yeah, these little bolts. So you go around and count how many bolts you've got, and for every bolt you've got, you give yourself $10 billion. So in my example, I'm going to say, yep, Pretend Land's got 2 factories. So 2 lots of 10 billion, that's $20 billion. Sweet as. For every monument that you've got, that's a tourist attraction, you earn $5 billion. So in this example, I'm going to pretend. So you would count how many monuments you've got. Remember, everyone starts with no monuments, so you've only got any monuments if you built some yourself. In this example, I'm going to pretend that I have one monument. One monument's 5 billion, so I'm going to give myself 5 billion. Okay. Now, this other thing. You won't be putting any other in there to start with, but sometimes there might be some Earth challenges or some chance event cards that make you need to put something in there. So we've just left that spot there in case there's something extra that you need to include. Okay. Now what you do is you add up all of your units and buildings together. See here, add up all of your buildings and units. So every single soldier, jet plane, battleship, nuclear bomber, astronaut, all of those units, any of the buildings you've got, so that's every factory, every oil well, every farm, every mine, every monument, any building that you've got. So you go to your area and count them all up. Every single one of them that you got, they cost you cash, steel, and food, okay? So, but you end up putting the same number in 3 different boxes, yeah? See, it says count up all your units together here, and here, and here, right? So, in my example, I'm going to say I've got, let's say I've got 10 buildings altogether, and I've got 20 military units, yeah? So, all up, that's 30. So we'll type that in there. 30. Yep. So, and I put that same number in 3 different places. Yep. There. And there. Every unit, that's every soldier, every farm, everything, costs you $1 billion per game day. Yeah. 1 energy per game day, and 1 steel per game day. So you add up the total amount of units and buildings, and you put that number in those 3 different places. Now, again, we've got this little thing here for other. You won't have anything in your other to start with, so we'll just put a little line there. That means nothing. Okay, so now we've got to add this all up. So cash, I've got 20. 20 plus 5 is 25. But then I have to subtract 30. 25 minus 30 is minus 5, right? Uh-oh, Pretend Land's got problems. So what would happen when I submit my budget is that the World Bank would make me give them $5 billion. Now that won't happen much at the start. At the start of the game, I think the only team that's losing money is Africa, everybody else will be earning money. But it can definitely happen. So that's the example. So with cash, when you hand in your budget, World Bank either gives you money if you've earned money, or asks you to give it money if you've lost money. And the World Bank doesn't keep the money for itself, it puts it in the vault. That's that big plastic tub. Okay, we've done our cash, yeah. Now let's move on to steel. Okay, you'll notice these three purple areas for steel, energy, and food. See, it says reserves here, reserves. That's how much steel, energy, and food that you already had before your turn started. And that will be written on the National Reserves, the National Resources Board, the whiteboard that tracks steel, energy, and food. So what you need to do is go and have a look on that whiteboard and see what your reserves are. See how much steel you already had. So say, for example, for me, my place called Pretend Land has got, it's got 80 tons of steel. Yep. And maybe I have, and then I go and count how many mines I've got. So I count how many of those little nuts here. Yep. Maybe I've only got one mine. Not a very big place. I've got one mine. So one mine produces 10 million tons of steel. We just write 10. And then we're going to leave out the other. Remember, something might crop up that has an other, but in this example, we're going to say that doesn't have anything. So we add their lot up. 80 plus 10 is 90. 90 minus 30 is 60. Yeah. So my new reserves is 60. Now, you might notice something there. My reserves have gone down as well. Most of you, to start with, your reserves, all of your resources will be going up every game day, but they might be going down. So what would I need to do to get my steel up? I would probably want to build some more mines. Yep. Cool. So we've done our steel. And then once this is submitted, World Trade Organization, the worker for the UN, is going to write this new number on the resources reserves whiteboard. Okay? And you do the exact same thing for energy. Okay, so let's pretend that I've got heaps of energy. I've got 150 energy. Now the MGW just stands for million gigawatts of energy. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. It's just a measure of energy. It's just the number that matters anyway. So let's say I've got 150 energy. And I've got lots of oil wells. Yep. So remember that you can... so say I've got 3 oil wells, okay? 3 oil wells, 10 per oil well, so I have 30. Yay. In other, that's going to be where you would put... maybe you're going to buy some solar panels, maybe you're going to buy some wind turbines, maybe you're going to buy a nuclear power plant or a fusion power plant, and that's where you put it in there. But for me in this example, no one starts off with anything other than oil wells, so my other, I'm going to put nothing. Okay, so now I'm going to add that up. 150 plus 30 is 180. 180 minus 30 is 150. So you notice there that I made 30 energy, but I also used up 30 energy. So my reserves have stayed exactly the same. Here we go, 150 energy. Yay. The last one, and this is probably the trickiest thing on the whole of the budget, but it's not too tough if we can figure it out. And it's just working out how much food your population earns. So, let's say, for example, that I have heaps of food in reserve. I've got 500 million tons of food. Yay. And let's pretend that I have 2 farms. Now, you'll notice that 2 farms, the farms are a wee bit different. It's not 10 per farm, it's 150 per farm. So I've said I've got 2 farms, 2 lots of 150, that's 300. So I put 300 there. Yep. So I started with 500. I've grown another 300. Now this is where it gets a wee bit tricky. You got to work out what your population is. So you notice down here it says, count how many million population you have and halve it. So let's say, for example, that Pretend Land, I'm just going to sketch on here. Let's say that, for example, Pretend Land has got 100 million people. Yep. What's half of 100 million? 50. Okay. So, I have eaten 50, my pretend land has eaten 50 million tons of food. The way that you work out the number that goes in here is you take your population and you halve it. Yeah. So if your population was 200 million, then you would have eaten 100 food. If your population's 500 million, you would have eaten 250 million food. If your population is a billion, that's 1,000 million, you would have eaten 500 million tons of food. There's some teams that food doesn't apply to, okay? They can grow food and they can have food reserves, but their team is so small that we just, for the purposes of this game, we say, don't worry about food. Your team's so small that we don't need to worry about having eaten the food. So those teams are the United Nations doesn't eat any food, the World Bank doesn't eat any food, and Greenpeace doesn't eat any food. All of the continent teams and Palestine eat food. Oh, Anonymous doesn't eat any food either. So Anonymous, World Bank, Greenpeace, United Nations, don't worry about food. You can have food reserves, but you don't eat any because there's only a few people in your whole team in the real world. Okay? And that is it, my friends. I'm just going to put nothing in there. So I had started off with 500 food. Yeah, I grew another 300. So I'm up to 800. I ate 50. So now the result, 800 minus 50 is 750. So, and that is my budget. So this is what you do. When it's a couple of turns before your turn, you should start working on your budget so that when it's your turn, you've got it ready to hand in. You shouldn't do your budget on your turn because it can take 5-10 minutes to do. You need to have it ready before your turn, yeah? So when it's 3 or 4 people before you, start working on your budget, have it ready to go. You hand that in to World Bank. They will look at it and give you some money, or they'll say you owe us money. And then the World Trade Organization, that's the person who works for the UN, they will update the resource reserves whiteboard. They'll update your steel with the new reserves number, your energy with the new energy number, and they'll update your food with the new food number. In the rules, you'll see there are bad things that happen if you completely run out of cash or steel or energy or food. Yeah. In this example, I'm losing cash every day. See, I had to pay $5 billion in cash. How could I earn more cash? I could either get rid of some of my buildings and units, or I could build some factories, or I could build a monument, or maybe I could invent some other thing that helps me to earn money. With my steel, you'll notice that that's also going down. I started off with 80. I've now only got 60. How could I stop losing steel? Most obvious way is to build more mines, yeah? Or I could come up with some kind of weird invention that makes steel. Same with my energy. Oh, my energy's fine. I started off with 150. I'm now still on 150, so I haven't changed at all. If you wanted to earn more energy, you could buy some more oil wells, or you could go to the World Bank and buy solar panels, fusion power, nuclear power, wind turbines. They all make energy. And lastly, with food, I'm up with food because I had 2 farms that produced 300 million tons of food, but I only ate 50. So I've gone from 500 up to 750. Now, if you remember from the instructions, to win the game of EarthCraft, 2 things need to happen. You've got to solve all of the Earth challenges, but you also need to increase your well-being, which means you need to have more. Your reserves need to be higher than when you started the game, yeah? So if I started the game on 80, I need to make sure that my steel is more than 80 by the end of the game. Otherwise, we can't win the game, okay? So you will probably find that most people will need to build some stuff to get more cash, steel, energy, and food. Good luck with doing your first budget.